welcome to Firstpost Live, where we bring you the day's top 4 stories from across the world. I am Gushin Garland, live from the Firstpost studios. Let's begin with the headlines. Japan lodges a protest with China after a senior diplomat makes what Tokyo describes quote-unquote inappropriate remarks against Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi. The US also calls the comments threatening. South Korean prosecutors indict former President Yoon Suk-yeol for allegedly aiding the enemy by ordering drone flights over North Korea to justify martial law. Iran dismisses US accusations that it tried to assassinate Israel's ambassador in Mexico, calling the claim ridiculous and absurd. The US Senate takes a key step towards ending the longest government shutdown in history, clearing the way for a debate on restoring federal funding. And Indonesia adds late dictator Suharto to its list of national heroes, drawing criticism from activists over his authoritarian rule and human rights abuses. Can do. We begin with the Philippines. A typhoon named Phunwong hit the region and left a trail of destruction. At least 2 people died and more than 1 million people were evacuated. The weakening of the typhoon has now swept out of the Philippines and into the South China Sea. The storm, known locally as Typhoon Yuan, struck the northeastern province of Aurora late Sunday as super typhoon. It brought torrential rain and winds that tore down power lines, uprooted trees and triggered landslides across much of the Luzon Island, including parts of the capital, Manila.
The wind became really strong in the morning. We were shocked when the glass broke. It didn't hit anyone, but the wind was so strong, the jalousie broke.
Rescue teams in Aurora province said they were only beginning to assess the extent of the damage after heavy rains, and high flood waters made it impossible to mobilize overnight. In nearby Dingulan, powerful waves had smashed dozens of coastal homes and fishing boats. Authorities confirmed at least 2 deaths. A woman crushed beneath debris while attempting to evacuate in Samar province, and another person who drowned in a flash flood in Catanduanes. In Cagayan province, evacuees said that they had no choice but to flee. Defense officials said over 1.4 million people were evacuated nationwide as the storm approached. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. placed the country under a state of emergency following the compounded devastation from both typhoons. Pope Leo also offered prayers for people of the Philippines.
Sono vicino.
My thoughts are with the people of the Philippines affected by a violent typhoon. I pray for the deceased and their families, for the injured and displaced.
E gli sfollati.
The State Weather Bureau said Phunwong's center was last spotted moving northwest over the South China Sea and heading towards Taiwan, continuing to weaken as it moved over cooler waters. At its peak, the super typhoon packed sustained winds of 185 kilometers per hour and gusts of up to 230 kilometers per hour. This was powerful enough to cover nearly 2/3 of the Philippine peninsula with its massive 1,600-kilometer wide wind and rain band. It was the second major storm to batter the country in a week, following Typhoon Kalmegi, which claimed at least 224 lives in the central Philippines before heading towards Vietnam, where it killed 5 more. The Philippines, one of the world's most disaster-prone nations, is struck by around 20 typhoons every year and frequently endures earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. As Phunwong makes way, the country is left grappling with widespread flooding, damaged infrastructure, and the daunting task of rebuilding yet again. Shifting focus to the US immigration policy under President Donald Trump. The State Department has issued a new directive that could deny visas or green cards to foreign nationals with certain health conditions. The directive sent from Washington, D.C. to U.S. embassies worldwide instructs visa officers to closely review medical records. As per the directive, applicants with common chronic health conditions such as diabetes and obesity must be flagged. This is according to the directive, will prevent hundreds of thousands of dollars in medical care in the United States. The health conditions for which an applicant could be denied a U.S. visa or permanent residency include diabetes, cardiovascular disease, cancer, metabolic and neurological disorders, mental health issues and obesity, all described as potential burdens on the U.S. healthcare system. The memo specifically calls out obesity, underlining its links with asthma, sleep apnea and high blood pressure, all conditions requiring long-term costly care. The directive says such applicants may be classified as a public charge, a term used for people who might depend on government assistance due to age or medical needs. The rule applies across visa categories, but experts say it's most likely to impact green card or permanent residency applicants. Immigration attorneys call the directive troubling, warning that officers are now being asked to make medical judgments they are not trained for. That's because the State Department directive goes further, asking officers to consider the health of an applicant's family members. For instance, if children or elderly dependents have chronic illness or special needs, officers must weigh whether that could affect the applicant's ability to work or pay medical bills. Immigration experts say the move could rewrite immigration rules based on speculative medical costs. Immigrants already undergo health screenings for communicable diseases and vaccinations. But this directive looks beyond immediate risks, targeting chronic and future illnesses. Since returning to office, President Trump has pushed a string of immigration restrictions, from a $100,000 H-1B fees to tougher citizenship reviews. But this latest move marks a sharp shift where even common health conditions of chronic nature could determine who gets to enter the United States. Syria's President Ahmed al-Shara is on a landmark official visit to the United States, the first by a Syrian head of state since the country's independence in 1946. His arrival comes just a day after Washington removed him from its specifically designated global terrorist list. Al-Shara arrived in Washington late on Saturday for his first official visit since taking office after the fall of Bashar al-Assad last year. The Syrian leader is scheduled to meet U.S. President Donald Trump at the White House on Monday. Now, yesterday, ahead of his high-profile meeting, Shara was seen in a lighter moment, playing basketball with U.S. military officials in Washington. The video, which has gone viral online, shows Shara and Foreign Minister Asad al-Shabani in professional attire sharing the court with U.S. military officials. On the same day, Shara met representatives of the Syrian community in Washington, accompanied by Foreign Minister and U.S. envoy for Syria. He underlined the importance of maintaining ties between Syrians abroad and their homeland, praising their role in conveying Syria's true image.
This will be a historic visit, as it will be the first time a Syrian president has entered the White House in 70 or 80 years. There will certainly be many issues to discuss, starting with the lifting of sanctions and opening a new chapter in U.S.-Syrian relations. We want to establish a strong partnership between America and Syria. Syria is currently suffering fighting ISIS, so we need international support in this matter. ISIS is not only Syria's responsibility, it is a regional and international threat.
Now, just days earlier, Washington led a UN Security Council vote to lift sanctions on Shara and his group Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, a move reflecting the US acknowledgement of reforms under Syria's new leadership. State Department spokesperson said Damascus had met key American demands, including efforts to find missing US citizens and to eliminate remaining chemical weapons. These actions, the spokesperson said, are being taken in recognition of the progress demonstrated by the Syrian leadership after the departure of Bashar al-Assad and more than 50 years of repression. He added that delisting Shara would promote regional security, stability, and an inclusive Syrian-led political process. Formerly affiliated with Al-Qaeda, Shara's group Hayat Tahrir al-Sham was delisted as a terrorist organization by Washington as recently as July. Prior to leading HTS, Shara fought for Al-Qaeda in Iraq and was at one point imprisoned by US forces. He was also subject to an American bounty of $10 million, a past that makes his current status as a White House guest all the more striking. Analysts say Shara's White House visit is a hugely symbolic moment, marking another step in his transformation from militant commander to global statesman. After addressing the UN General Assembly in September and being removed from international sanctions lists, Shara is now expected to seek US backing for Syria's reconstruction, which is estimated by the World Bank at over $216 billion. As Washington and Damascus move from confrontation to cautious cooperation, the world watches how this once isolated nation navigates its comeback on the global stage. And for our final story, let's talk about the Indian capital. Parents, children and protesters gathered at India Gate as part of the clean air protest, demanding urgent action on the capital's pollution emergency. Protesters were seen holding placards. One read, "I miss breathing," and another, "Help us breathe." Many parents brought their children along, urging authorities to protect their future from the city's worsening air emergency. Most parts of the city recorded an AQI between 300 and 400, indicating hazardous air quality. Protesters also demanded an independent air regulator and real-time pollution data from authorities. Delhi recorded an overall AQI of 370 at 4 p.m. on Sunday. But every year, the capital's pollution crisis turns into a major challenge for city dwellers. Some reports even said that private monitors had recorded an AQI as high as 999 in several locations. On Monday, the capital was again choked under an intense blanket of smog as cooler temperatures triggered another spike in toxic air. Experts warned that breathing the city's toxic air could damage the lungs, skin, hair, bones, and even fertility in some cases. Several demonstrators were detained by local police. Officials cited the lack of prior permission and road blockages as the reasons for the detentions. Protesters claim that clean air was a fundamental right under Article 21.
एयर पोल्यूशन के अगेंस्ट अपनी प्रोटेस्ट रेज करने आया हूँ, यही मेरा पर्पस है, ताकि हमारी उम्मीद ये है कि नॉन वायलेंट प्रोटेस्ट रहे, जिससे अथॉरिटीज़ फाइनली इस पर कुछ कार्रवाई करें, जिससे एयर पोल्यूशन ना कि दिल्ली में बट सारे नॉर्थ इंडिया में इसमें कुछ सुधार हो, इस पर कुछ एक्शन लिया जाए ताकि इसमें कुछ सुधार हो और ताकि आगे की पीढ़ियों के लिए इससे मदद मिले.
Doctors have reported a 60% rise in cases of respiratory illnesses like asthma and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Most people reported milder symptoms such as coughing, sore throat, itchy red eyes, and dry, flaky skin. However, top pulmonologists have also advised people to leave Delhi for 6 to 8 weeks to protect themselves, especially those with chronic lung or heart disease. The government has attempted to address the issue using technological measures, including cloud seeding, a weather modification technique that enhances rainfall by dispersing substances into clouds. However, the attempt failed due to low moisture levels. Humidity remained between 10 and 15%, far below the required 50 to 60% for successful trials. Amid worsening air quality, 91 public and private buildings in Delhi installed anti-smog guns. Delhi turns into a gas chamber every winter, thanks to cooler air, which traps microparticles near the ground, and a combination of traffic emissions and stubble burning that make conditions worse. This story is no longer about pollution. It's about survival. As Delhi's skyline stays grey, citizens are turning up the pressure. We'll continue to keep a track of this. That's all we have for the show on today. We'll see you again tomorrow at the same time. Thanks for watching.